Well, Mom, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome. We'll start with the line, I'm not a perfectionist, that's for sure. That'll be the first line of the podcast.
Okay.
Because now people will understand I'm definitely your son.
Yeah. True.
So the reason I wanted to bring you onto the podcast is there's several. One is we've never actually done a podcast together.
No, we haven't.
Two is you might be the only person in our family who's smarter than me.
Wow.
You might be.
That's a big thing coming from you.
Yeah. And what I really want to help people with today is one of the hardest things I ever did was come to tell you and Dad, I'm not going to be a chiropractor anymore. I'm done being a doctor. It doesn't light me up.
I remember it well.
I believe it. And what I want to do today is see if you and I can help entrepreneurial people out there, whether they're trainers, coaches, business owners, whatever you want to be, to better communicate with and to gain empathy for the other party involved in the conversation, whether it's their parents, their spouse, which it's different, but
right.
So that the conversation can be more productive. Right. Okay. So I'll give people a little bit of a frame and then you can add color and we'll get into questions.
Okay.
My father was a chiropractor. My uncle, my father's youngest brother, followed in his footsteps. My dad was successful. I did a podcast a while ago speaking about how for a while I felt uncomfortable talking about the fact that growing up I had a great childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't come from nothing. So should I not be proud of what I've accomplished? I had to deal with that. The answer is, by the way, no. Of course I should be. And I am.
Good.
Thank you. But there's this, you're not as Jewish mother as what I'm going to describe. But for people who don't come from the Jewish community, there is what does your son do? Is he a doctor? Is he a lawyer?
Yeah.
What does he do for a living? And there's this expectation of traditional successful career path that's easy to describe and put him in a box.
Absolutely.
Then the parents get to go down to South Florida, usually Boca. You guys bucked the trend and went to Palm Beach. But you get to go down to Florida and tell all your friends about your son, the doctor. Now, I spent, from 2009 until 2016, never clearing $40,000 of income in a given year as a doctor.
Right.
Despite the fact that I was working with Olympians, professional baseball players, CrossFit Games champions.
All the shiny things.
All the shiny things. And my wife was carrying me financially on her $55,000 a year teacher salary for a while.
She's a good girl.
She's amazing. Now, I finally had a good year. 2017, I hired that mentor who taught me a lot of the things that you guys tried to teach me for a long time, but I couldn't and didn't want to hear because you're my parents.
Right.
So you have to hear it from a stranger. And there were some things he taught me that were counterintuitive to the things that I had learned from you guys that I had to figure out for myself.
Right. The best teacher.
Yeah. I finally had a good financial year, like 2017. I don't remember what I made on my tax return, but somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000.
Right. Nice.
Reduced my workload from 80, 90-hour weeks to 50.
And you felt better about what you were doing.
Felt better about all of it. Felt proud for the first time in my life about the business I was in. And that's the year I realized I know exactly what it takes to be successful at this now. I know how I could double this next year. And I don't want to do it. And the conversation I was most apprehensive about having was the one with you and Dad about, I don't want to do this anymore.
I can appreciate that.
Why can you appreciate that?
Because it was a long time coming to get there to begin with. I think probably, I can't speak for men, but probably it's a proud...
Speak for all men, please.
Yes. I think it's
on behalf of men.
On behalf of all men.
Yeah.
Who are in my family, who I'm married to. I think it's a proud moment when your child wants to do what you do, and you can bring him along and introduce him as my son, and, you know, have that part of it, you know, fulfill some part of you.
Sure. So when it came time for that conversation, I remember having it with myself many times. I'm like, if I say this, how will that be received? And I went through, and this is, you know, this is unlike me.
Yes.
If I write an article.
Right. You don't even read it back, right?
I don't like to read it back.
Right.
Like Well,
you're my son.
Okay. Perfect. Like I remember when I was in school writing articles for a magazine, they were like, how many hours did it take you to write this? I'm like, what's the max?
Right.
You're not going to pay me for being done quicker than everybody else if you're going to run it as it is. Now, if you send it back to me and you're like, hey, this sucks.
Right.
Rewrite it, edit it. Sure. But no.
You
what's
are
the max?
so my son.
Yeah.
I did that with the wellness committee, whatever it was.
Consortium.
And they wanted to pay me by the hour to get a certain job done. I said, no. They said, well, that's how we do it. I'm like, well, if you want me, you're going to pay me this amount. If it takes me 1 hour, good for me. If it takes me 100 hours, bad for me.
Right.
But that's what is it worth to have me do something? So yeah, you're my son.
Yeah, and keep me on the hook until the job is done and done well.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I'm speaking to that because I don't like to practice the thing. I like to put it out there, get the feedback, and do it again. Cody is helping me do a better job with my speaking and practice first.
I always find my first time I say something is the best that I say it. And then when I say, your father will often say to me, oh, wait, say that for me again because I want to put it in this. I'm like, oh, I don't know what I said.
Right.
So
we need videographers following us around so that we can just say it once.
Absolutely. So genius can be captured on the first take.
That's it. The reason I want a documentary of me is not self-serving. It's so that the world can experience my innate and immediate greatness.
Absolutely.
That's hard to just reconstruct.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Well, now that we have all of our altruism out.
Okay.
I practiced many times how I was going to have a conversation with you guys about it because I wanted it to be received in a way where you felt considered.
And did you practice speaking to both of us at the same time?
I practiced all possible situations.
Okay.
I practiced, if I talk to mom about it, I need to consider that mom is going to be considering dad. That mom would have her own answer. But that she would be reticent. See, sometimes we need to edit. Reticent to share your real answer with me because you would have considerations for dad and you'd want to reserve. So how do I meet that need?
Which you have to do today too. You know that, right?
He doesn't listen to the podcast.
That's true.
I thought
he will ask me what we talked about.
Yeah, and you can tell him whatever you want. Tell him. We'll leave. Tell him the political truth. Okay.
He already asked me this morning. Are you going to talk politics? I said no.
That's what we're going to do. I'd be happy to, but I don't think this is the forum where people want to hear us talk politics.
No.
So I thought about talking to him without you around, where he would think he needed to consider what you would think. He would say, well, you should think about how he would put
he wouldn't consider. Yes, he always considers how I feel about things. It would be
just
more.
I was right about it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm going to leave it there. Go
okay,
ahead.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Nice job. You're ready for office. And then I considered what would it be like with the two of you. And obviously I preferred the two of you because at the end of the day, that conversation for me wasn't about either of you.
Right.
And so when it was over, I was the thing that I most practiced was actually discontent from you guys and me being able to say,
I can live with this.
Yeah. And I know they love me And they will either come around or they won't. And that's theirs, not mine. I can't control that. That's what I had to most settle into. And once I was there, it was okay. Well, now that you're there, how do you present this in a way that allows them to think about it through your thoughts, my thoughts? Do you remember what I said to you?
Not specifically. I know where I was when we had the initial conversation on the pool deck. We were in Florida, and I when Dad speaks, you're generally on speakerphone, so you got us both at the same time.
That was the seeding of the conversation. You remember when
right? Correct.
The
and then we were upstairs in the unit.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah. What I was thinking about it like a lawyer from all my legal experience.
Yes.
How do I put Mom and Dad into a corner where they have to say yes, and then they can think about it afterwards and come back with any questions, because they're not going to be prepared to ask the questions in the moment.
Right.
And so I said, if I'm correct, I think that no matter what I do and no matter how I do it, you guys want me to be happy. Is that true? Like, you guys, generally speaking, the thing you most want from me is for me to be happy?
Yes.
And then security allows for that. Whatever status I'm able to obtain allows me, different communities, all of those things are more likely to make me happy. Yes. And you guys said, yeah, yes. And then I said, okay, I'm no longer happy doing what I'm doing for a living. And I'm much more happy in pursuit of this other thing that I started. And I want to go all in on that, because I know I'm not happy with the certainty of the success I already have and what it takes to have more. And I am happy to pursue this other thing, even if it fails.
Right.
And then I said, I would love your blessing to do that. And I left it with you guys.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, the thing, and it's probably true in every family, is that when there are two parents, you have two different points of view on pretty much everything. And you've been practicing for many years to try not to negate what the other person says. And I've often had this conversation with your father where I say, don't answer so fast, because now I have to have your back and I may be totally the other direction. So can you just slow the no? It was always no. I said, you go to the no, and then we have to undo the no. So can we go to the, let me think about it. I don't know where we were at that time, because I don't remember the specifics of the conversation, but I know that my immediate response would have been, I trust you, go for it.
The first response you guys collectively gave was, are you sure you've thought this through?
That's true. Yeah.
Are you sure you've thought this through? And I said, yes. And then I gave the example. I was like, look, I had an experience like months ago. This is not a quick decision. Because one of the things Dirk taught me when I was mentoring with him was, he's like, you sometimes realize and sometimes don't, that you will think about things for months. And then when you have it crystallized, you come to the person who you want to present it to and expect them to be able to jump on board as quickly as that moment. When you've had 6 months to think about the thing and they're hearing it now for the first time. And you get frustrated when people don't immediately adopt what you're talking about. And so I was prepared to say, look, I know this is going to take time for you guys. We talked about it in November. That was on purpose because I knew I was out in December.
Oh yeah, it was very soon after.
Yeah,
that I remember.
Yeah. I had just told Kim right before I told you to give her even like, because there's a bigger shock for her. That's there's whole income now.
Of course.
Oh, it's gone now.
Yeah, I mean, you're just our child. You're her life.
Your 40-year-old child.
Well, now you're 40.
I was a tender age of 34 at the time.
That's right. You were a baby.
And then, do you remember what Dad said after that? promise me you'll never let your license lapse.
Yeah, okay.
And then I gave him the political answer. Mm-hmm. I have no intention of letting my license lapse.
Right. That I remember. Yes.
6 months later, I got the renewal, like, you need to do the CEUs.
Right.
And I was like, do I though? Do I?
And then it was years later he asked you about it.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, by the way, I did.
Yeah. But by then he didn't care anymore.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't say he didn't care anymore, but he could live with it.
He was able to stop caring when I laid out for him, this is what I would have to do to get my license back.
Right.
I did all of the research necessary to know I'm not back at square one.
It's an educated decision.
Yeah. All I have to do is get the CEUs for the years I was missing, and I'm back in the game.
Right. But this is a man who likes to fix everything for everyone.
My father.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're not somebody who wants to be fixed by somebody on the outside.
Wants to be fixed.
Well, probably not, but we're talking about you. And it's hard for him to relinquish what he believes to be in your best interest, even though he ultimately wants you to be happy and feel fulfilled, because that's what he got out of his world.
Well, and that's as a parent now, that's a really reasonable thought. It's the thought of, I know that you think this will make you happy. I also know it's on the other side of this other thing.
Right.
For me, not necessarily for you.
Right.
And I have the same urge that he has to fix.
Right. Well, I do too.
Yeah. It's at least from my perspective, when you're the caretaker or even just someone who cares about someone going through something, you hate to see somebody go through something that you feel like if they would just do what you would say to do, they'd be through it. But I've learned through fixing, quote, people who are listening and not watching, fixing with air quotes, that fix is almost never permanent, and it almost always ends in resentment.
It's like you said before, you really need to learn from your own experiences. If you're someone who is more introspective, you'll know you don't know everything, and you'll ask advice, or you'll ask perspective, maybe not advice, and you'll ask other people who perhaps have been where you are or in a similar type thing, and you'll say, how did this go for you? What things should I be considering? But ultimately, you make your own choices, and you live with your own choices. And for me, when it came to you, I have always trusted your instincts. Even when they're wrong, even when they've been wrong, because you believe so deeply in what you choose to do, even when you had flex. And at the beginning, it was great for us. We got to come and watch you speak in front of all these people and watch hundreds of athletes competing, and to be on the mall in Washington, D.C. I mean, that was just almost a surreal experience for a while. I mean, for the event. And then, but then when you learn you're not making money at it, or it's not as successful, it's not doing what you wanted it to do, either for itself or for you, then okay. And that was hard for your father to let you give up on that too. And it was because I think he enjoyed it so much.
Yeah.
And it was a great day. The days were great. Yeah. That was a fun time. And I know that you've taught me a lot. And the big thing is that if your life is not giving you joy, maybe these are not your words, then what are you doing?
I'll go a step further than that, because my life was giving me joy. I loved putting on those big events.
Right.
My ego was stroked
right.
by professional athletes flying out to see me.
Right.
And I had joy from being a part of the community that was my CrossFit gym.
Right.
And I had joy from being able to give my sister a membership. And say, come work out. Like, this is my place is your place.
Right.
All of that stuff did give me joy.
Right.
The thing was, deep down, I recognized that I was compromising on the magnitude of the life I could be living.
Right. Okay.
I didn't have the words to describe it necessarily. I remember feeling like I was a Ferrari sitting at the bottom of a lake where I was like, I have so much in me that I want to be able to give and to experience. And
that was too small.
I was in too small of a fishbowl running the clinic in the gym. That was the hard part for me.
Well, you always I remember taking the drive down to Maryland when we went to visit a friend of yours when you were a sophomore, I think, in high school. And we had the whole ride down, the whole 4.5 hours.
Sophomore friend in high school?
No, you were a sophomore in high school.
What
we
friend
went to
did I have
visit
in
Elon.
Oh.
Older brother.
Right.
And it was all about, well, what do you think you want to do with your life? Would you rather sit behind a desk? Right. And you were way into the dig the ditches. And that wasn't to make a big impact on the world, but it was that you needed to be in motion. And that was just the physical piece of it. But ultimately, it's the mental piece of it too. And I get that. And I knew that you were always grasping for the next thing. Like your father is more about do what you're doing now really, really well before you look at the next thing. But you're like, well, and I could be doing this, so maybe someone else could do this piece for me, and I can move on to the next thing. And I get that. And if you build the right people around you, you can do that.
Big if.
Yeah. But you have always been a deep thinker. You know, your Uncle Steve used to say to you when you were a baby, so what do you think about world peace? Because you always had that look on your face about, like you were thinking about something deep. And, but you have always been thoughtful about what you would do, except when you painted the toilet seats brown. That's a whole different story.
Listen, those weren't even our toilet seats. They were just in the girls' bathroom.
They were just in the school bathroom.
We blamed it on the Boy Scouts.
We did blame it on them. Well, you live and you learn as a parent.
Right.
But
yeah, don't send your sixth grade son with his best friend to the bathroom to clean paintbrushes with brown paint all over them.
I didn't know the color. Okay. But yeah, well, like I said, you live and you learn. You'll see. That's part of being a parent.
Oh, I'm learning. But going back to what you were just describing, there was a moment in there when you were talking about me thinking about the next thing. That's something I struggle with.
Right.
Still. And Dad was right when he would give me that advice. Because I remember vividly walking on the boardwalk one day in Long Beach talking about Flex is doing this, the clinic is doing this, the gym is doing this, I'm going to launch this personal training business in hotels, and I'm trying to make these backpacks. And he was like, why don't you do one thing really well? And my thought was, because they're all building. And when they all get to where they're supposed to be, I'm going to have 5 successful businesses instead of 1. And what ended up happening for people who don't know the story is when 1 would do well, 2 would struggle because
it's always
I wasn't
that way.
But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be that way. But you do need to finish setting up the 1 and let it prove it can operate in your absence before you shift your focus anywhere else.
Right.
So, for example, Active Life technically is 3 different companies now. We have the brick and mortar, we have the development of the coach, and we have the development of the individual.
Right.
And you can even add the gym owner if you wanted to. The only division of the company that has not done $1 million plus in a year yet is the gym, the location, the brick and mortar. And it will.
Right.
Now, I don't really have a job in any of them. We've gotten ourselves to the fortunate position where we have great people in the leadership positions and in the executional positions in all of the business.
Right. That's the key.
It is. And when I was trying to do all these things at the same time, when I was in my young 30s, I didn't have the skills to be a leader yet. I had the skills to be a doer, a manager, but not a leader. Do you follow me?
Yes.
And so Dad's advice there was sound. I just couldn't hear it from Dad.
Right.
Because he hadn't, for all the success he had, he had not accomplished what I wanted to accomplish.
Right. And he wishes you
Oh, I know. I have no doubt.
100-fold what he did.
I know. He says it all the time.
Yeah. Because he wants you to take care of him when we get old.
That's it. Well, I keep telling him, listen, you eat real food and you exercise, and I'll take care of you until the day you die.
That's right.
You eat the shit, and you give me a reason why you can't go train, and you will get you a big-breasted blonde nurse if mom's gone.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
That's the reality if mom's still here.
That's fair.
Yeah.
We'll go on adventures, and he can have a big-breasted blonde nurse.
Some. That's fine.
Yeah. Of reasonable age, not too young. That's ridiculous. But anyway, take me through the after, right? So now you've heard.
Right.
Because I imagine when I started to experience success in the clinic, there was a sense of pride for you guys and a sense of relief. Like, you knew I wasn't making money before that.
Right. Okay.
You knew I made money for a year. I've never asked you. I imagine that there was a sense of relief that I was finally making a living.
I guess. I mean, I knew Kim was making a living. Though Mackenzie was not born yet, right?
She was.
She was born then. I just never doubted that you would.
I didn't either.
I really didn't. And that, it's funny. Daddy asked me all the time, did you ever imagine a life like this? And I'm like, I never thought that it would be any different.
So the answer is yes, I did imagine a life.
Well, I didn't think about it that way. Because I was fortunate. I had a really nice upbringing. We didn't live an extravagant life, but we had everything we needed. I had good clothes and, we never worried about bills being paid and that sort of thing. I just kind of was naive to think that was just what was going to happen to me. But I also knew when I married your father that I always say I married him for potential.
That's what my wife would say about me.
Yeah, because he was a student at the time. I was supporting the family on my $10,500 salary at McGraw-Hill.
Well, it was a different world. Votes matter.
It was it was a different world. And my parents helped us out. They would fill the tank of gas and buy us meat from the butcher. But I just never doubted that it would be what it is. Because I knew the kind of man that I married.
Right.
And I knew he wouldn't have been satisfied with anything less. A combination of a life he wanted to live and an ego that he needed to fill. And, a comparison with perhaps some of his experiences when he was younger, that he never wanted to find himself back in that spot again. But I never, so I never really thought about it much, and I didn't worry about you in the same way because I knew you would get there. And you did.
So if somebody, well, thank you. If somebody
and you're my son, so you have a lot of me.
Obviously. You and me both graduating from Ivy League schools in 3 years. or failing your last class before graduation at University of Maryland.
What does it mean to fail? I don't understand that one.
No. The inside joke there is that I got a D+ in a community health class. My second semester. I'm telling the audience.
I know.
I know you know the story. My second semester of senior year at University of Maryland. In my defense, because there was a class participation grade that was not mentioned in the syllabus, and I thought I had a B+, but I had a 0 for the class participation, which just so happened to weigh the perfect amount to give me a D+ lesson.
Yes.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got to walk at graduation.
Yeah, you did. And you gave a speech.
Which I found out about that morning.
I'm not surprised. But I remember liking what you said.
Yeah, well, you guys told me we're excited to hear you speak. And I was like, yeah. I wrote my speech and then spoke about it.
Okay.
But
those are the best ones.
Yeah. We get to walk across the stage, and then I got to graduate 6 months later after taking a class at Hofstra. Locally.
Right.
Because we negotiated with the school I didn't have to come back for a semester.
Yes.
Good times. But like that,
I kind of blacked all that out of my head.
I think some of this should give people some insight to like there was always entrepreneur in me. There was never I'm gonna go get a good solid job.
Never.
And take a pension.
It was never that.
I got offered a job to go work in finance in Hong Kong.
Yeah, there was always things like that would come your way because people could see the quality in you. But it was never anything you entertained, not even for a breath.
Right.
That was, when you wanted to get a softball game going when you were in still high school, you just called all the guys and got a game together.
That would have been a baseball game. For the record.
Okay, I'm sorry, baseball game.
That's
You're right,
okay.
but you made it happen. You know, when you wanted to do something at University of Maryland, you know, you started that co-ed football thing.
Oh yeah,
the league. You just did it. You know, you always, when you wanted to do something, you could do it. I had no doubts that you could figure it out.
I forgot about that league.
Yeah. I remember when you brought Robin
My
in one
sister, the
game.
ringer.
That's right. And they were like, I don't know who to guard now.
Yeah.
You know, because guys with the guys, and then you had a girl better than half the guys.
Yep.
So, but you always knew how to get stuff done. And you were never afraid to do it. If it didn't work, okay, on to the next thing. So I knew there would be the next thing, and I knew eventually it would all come together.
What's interesting about that is I think anybody listening to this who thinks that they want to be an entrepreneur or thinks that they want to bet on themselves, right? Even if you're going to be a personal trainer in a commercial gym and make a good living doing that, you're betting on yourself. It's entrepreneurial to do that.
Right.
What I want people to hear from what you're describing is that I always had a borderline unreasonable level of self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Like there was no evidence that I should think so highly of myself, but I did. And so when I would fail, when I would get doors slammed to my face, my thought was always, well, they're idiots. They just don't see it. It was never, maybe I'm not good enough. It was always, these people are idiots, right? All the way to pitching the executive board at the Intercontinental Hotel Group for in a hotel personal training with business cards that I had just made at Kinko's. If they say no, they're idiots.
Yeah.
But yeah.
When did you start watching Shark Tank?
I don't know when it started.
So I think that influenced the way you thought about things a lot too.
How so?
Because I think you watch these people who were kind of you stand up in front of these successful business people who knew what it would take or knew where your mind had to be. And they would shoot down the people who were like, I know you think you're great, but you're not investable. I'm like, what do you mean I'm not? And they would explain it. And I think you took a lot of that, you internalized a lot of it, whether you meant to or not, and would watch who was successful, who wasn't, what did they do? Like you're also, you like to pay attention and you like to learn from things. So I think even just something as mundane as a TV show gave you a different way to look at things. You know, it's not like you learned everything there, but all of a sudden you had a new perspective.
I can see what you're talking about. It was what I learned most from that show in particular is if you can't describe your company's unique advantage and the reason why it would be harder to recreate it than it would be to just invest in it, then you don't have a valuable business. You have a really good job.
Okay.
That was the most important thing I took from that. That's all. And like, so then, and that did influence, because one of the things that Dad will say to me a lot is, you should pay yourself more. You should pay yourself more. I can find fluff in your balance sheet. I'm like, I don't think we kind of have a CFO for that, who looks at the bank account every day. Pretty sure they'd find the fluff if we had it. But, and I was always reinvesting all of the money back into the business. There was a happy space in between.
That's right.
He was right. I was underpaying myself. I was still struggling to get by financially running a multi-million-dollar business. It's like, what are you doing?
And at a certain point, you're going to say,
why am I doing this?
And so I think that addressed
and
that.
So, and what was really interesting about that is when I brought that to our executive team, they all agreed. They were like, yeah, you should pay yourself enough money that you don't have to worry about money when you come to work. Because that will it allowed me to be more dispassionate with decisions.
It also allowed, it was your mindset for your staff. You wanted them to be paid like professionals. You wanted, I'll go to the flagship, which was later in your development, but you wanted your coaches to have a career, not a job. And yet you were treating yours like a job.
Yeah. So good lessons there. But so what I want people to take from that is that if you're thinking about betting on yourself in any way, shape, or form, I think you have to be so impervious to rejection that you forget it happened. I've forgotten about people who've told me no, because as soon as they tell me no, I just discard them as an idiot. And then I think about, okay, well, either they're an idiot or I didn't get my message across, but if they couldn't see it in me, they're an idiot. And so I'll work on my message. but they're an idiot. That's how my brain works. And
I know.
there's a healthy level to it, and there's also an unhealthy level to it.
Well, as long as you should take the first step and say, what I do when I get a negative reaction from someone, I usually will start with, did I do something to elicit that response? And if I really am honest with myself, which I think I'm pretty good about being, I will either say, oh, you never should have said this, or it was the way you said it, or I'll say, no, they're just an idiot, which, happens a lot. But I think you need to take that step and say, what Daddy says all the time.
You and me are so good.
Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. Yes, we are.
I should you and I, because I don't want
That's right.
I don't want people to quote.
Me is so good,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm his grammar coach.
It's you?
A little bit.
A little bit. It would have been twice today if I didn't correct that one.
Yes.
That's true. But so let's just take the person who's talking to their parent.
Okay.
If you're going to talk to the parent and they're afraid for the decisions that their once child, now adult, wants to make, because it leads to less stability, less predictability, perceived stability, perceived predictability. But it's what their heart is set on.
Right.
Just saying, okay, I trust you, do whatever you want,
right.
isn't necessarily the responsible thing to do as a parent. What would you advise a parent to ask, to suggest, to be thinking about with their son or daughter?
In the second conversation, because it's not something I think a parent can bring up in the moment.
Well, what you're saying is first conversation, hear it and say, I'd like some time to think about this and come back to you.
Right. I think that's always, I've learned that my response is more often, let me think about that, than it is yes, no, whatever it is.
So when they're thinking about it.
Right. So then I think what a parent would want to know is, how much thought have you put into this? How long have you been thinking about this? Where did it start? What do you have? What safeguards for yourself? Because we're always going to worry about you. And I'm sure your answer would have been, I don't have any safeguards. But which I guess makes it all that much more important that you be successful at it. So I get that. I know how your mind works.
Yeah.
You're not you're not a bet hedger.
Plan B.
Right. And I know that. And I get
expect
that.
them to fail?
I get that too. As long as you're willing, you can pivot, and that's something that you have to show that you can do that. I think as a parent, we just want to know that you've really thought this through, and how do you see this working for you? I also, for me, is this going to bring you joy? Is this going to be a passion for you? Because obviously everything you've done up to this point is missing something to hit your passion point. So what has it been missing, and how will you get that from where you're going? And that would be an important thing for a parent, I think, to want to know. And I think that the more background you, as the person who's making the choice, the child, the more you're always going to be a kid. You know that. The more that party can give to their parents about how they've been feeling, and that I've tried feeling this way, and I had hoped this would do this for me, and I had hoped that would do that for me. I think the more that they can give a little bit of that adds a little bit of comfort, I guess is the word. Parents will continue to worry about their children to a degree. I'm not a worrier by nature. It's not who I am. I don't, it's not, I know that there's a time to worry, and I know worry is a useless emotion. I know that if there's a time to take an action, I will take the action. But I also, for me, so it doesn't keep me up at night. Like even when my father was sick and dying, it didn't keep me up at night until I knew that it was happening for sure. So that's just my, myself, my person. But parents care about their children, and I care, and I want to see your life be successful and happy. And I know for you, if you're not getting something bigger out of life, you can't be 100% happy. You can be happy when you're married, happy with your children, happy, with parts of your life, but I want you to have that whole package. And I think most parents would feel that way for their kids.
I think if parents know how to feel that way for themselves, they want their kids to feel that way. I would love for you to, can you say the whole thing again? No, I'm just kidding. if you could share just a short, imagine you're trying to say this for a clip.
Okay.
And maybe we'll use it as a clip. Maybe we won't. What should parents be thinking about before the second conversation when their kid tells them, I want to take the less safe route?
I think they're thinking about, because we can't help it, how can I be there in case? And are you, if this is the direction you really want to go, who am I to tell you no? Just be smart.
What are the questions that you think a parent should ask to make sure that their kid has thought this through?
Well, like I said before, tell me how what you've been doing all along hasn't given you what you want out of life and how you think this will.
Yeah. I think to take it from the opposite side, as the person who's going to be giving this news to the parent and looking for the support, it's important to put yourself in the parent's position.
Well, that was my other thought about the reverse.
Well, that's why I asked you instead of speaking for the parent. When you put yourself in the parent's position, one of the things that you've said to me that is true is you will always be, at most, as happy as your least happy kid. And so parents are concerned that you're making a decision that is not actually going to end up making you happy. It's going to give you strife.
Right.
It's not that you want to keep that strife from your parents, because as a parent, I'd want to know that my kid was hurting.
Right.
But it's important that you're selective with how you present any kind of adversity that you're dealing with to your parents. Once you've made the decision to share with them that you are pursuing adversity, right? Your parent doesn't know that when you say, I haven't been able to make any sales this month, they don't know that doesn't mean you can't pay your bills.
Right.
When you say, this client's giving me such a hard time, they don't know that that's not ruining your mental health all day, every day.
Right.
So the way that you present adversity to your parents is really important. The way I would recommend doing it would be to come to them with a problem that you are actively looking to solve and ask for their contribution to the solving of the problem. Do not bring them the symptom that problem is creating for you emotionally.
So don't vent.
Correct. Your parent, once you've told your parents, I'm making this move that is definitely scary for you to hear, venting to them about the problems of the move is off the table. Asking them for collaboration and ideation around how you can do a better job in what you're doing is more than on the table. In fact, I think that's one of the things that I've done without necessarily telling you guys I'm doing it to put you at ease with what it is I'm doing.
It's also you're bringing your parents into
that's what I mean.
Your life, and you're letting them know that you still value what they have to say, and that you get. Sometimes you act the way it may be suggested, sometimes you don't. But parents feel heard at least. I think everybody, this is an old news. Everybody wants to feel heard. And as a parent and as a child, you want to feel that the person that you're sharing your life with understands what you're trying to say to them. And as a parent, I've learned, well, as a person, I can't fix everything for everyone. Even if I could, I couldn't, because not everybody wants you to do that for them. So I like when you come to me and say, what do you think about this and that and that and that? And of course, I always believed you really wanted my input. I think you do too. And
hold on. Let me set the record straight. I don't ask if I'm not interested in your feedback. There are times.
Right, so it's got to be real.
It has to be real.
Yeah.
So I might not ask about the whole thing.
Right.
I might have this big thing I'm working on and 17 problems I'm considering.
Right.
And think, Mom could probably really contribute to this one of the 17.
Okay.
And you don't even need to know that there are 16 others
right.
that interplays with. You're now a contributor.
Right. That's fair. Okay. So I think that that's a wise suggestion for somebody who is approaching something that's difficult for their parents to wrap their head around, because you're not pushing them out of the discussion. I mean, it all goes back to what kind of relationship you have with your parents to begin with.
Well, I think anybody who is concerned about this conversation or this reality afterwards has the kind of relationship where this conversation would be helpful for them.
Right. Okay. That's fair. So it's really, if you have that open conversation back and forth, and everybody understands that you're just giving your point of view, and it's not necessarily going to be what, you're not going to say, well, he didn't do what I told him to do. Then I think that is a wise thing, because you're letting them know that you still respect them, and you still understand that they may know more than you on certain things because they've been around longer, if for no other reason, and they have more experiences, and you'll take what they say and do it in your way, but you'll learn something from their input.
I also think it's useful for the entrepreneurial person to share progress reports. Not in every day, not every week,
right?
But hey, I'm really excited about this thing that we accomplished.
Right.
Now your parents know, oh, there's momentum to this.
Right.
He's actually making progress, or she's actually making progress. One of the things that I did very tactically, and I don't know if you remember this, was to provide supporting evidence that this had a high likelihood of being successful. Do you remember what I did?
Specific, no.
I knew you listened to the podcast. Do you remember?
I love your podcast.
Thank you. Do you remember me bringing a guest on specifically for you to hear, so that you would feel more comfortable with me taking an entrepreneurial route online?
It's familiar now, but I don't, you know what?
You guys were asking, like, this is not, this is meant to just speak to the time we were in, right?
Okay.
It was 2017.
Okay.
One of the big questions that I don't remember if it was you and Dad or just Dad, are you sure this internet thing,
that was Daddy,
okay, is for real? Like, is it going to be around?
Right.
Pretty sure it is.
He feels that way about solar energy too.
Right. Well, let's be specific about how he feels that way about solar energy, because I think there are probably better ways to create energy than solar also.
Right, but right. I meant, it's okay, go ahead.
Okay. I brought John Berardi onto the podcast, who had founded Precision Nutrition and exited it.
Okay.
And I asked him about, like, what does life look like working, like you went from in-person to online. How did you do it? What were the obstacles you ran into? What were the successes? How did you share that? How did you hire? Like, all of those questions early on. I didn't even know what to ask.
Right.
And you listened to that podcast and you said, I really liked that episode because now I can understand what you're trying to do.
I think that a big part for me, and I remember that now that you're talking about it, I think a big part for me that gave me some extra confidence in you is that I knew you were always reaching out to other people who had done what you wanted to do or really had insight on certain things or were super successful in something. And you were always open to, like, even just having a coach, a mentor, thank you, is, like a big deal. And you were willing to pay for that. And I knew, like me, if I'm going to pay for something, I'm going to get my money's worth. So I'm going to do what you tell me to do. I'm going to be compliant and give it a chance to be successful instead of second guessing everything I'm being told. So I think that was helpful for me also, knowing that you had this universe of people, which, Dad and I talk about all the time. It wasn't available in an easy, I'm going to call it easy way.
Markson.
Right, that, but nothing beyond, like, you didn't know about all these successful people, enough about them all, because I don't even know how you would have found out.
Well, the interesting thing now, to speak to the counter argument to that, is that a lot of people you think are successful are complete aberrations.
Okay.
Like, they're lying, they're fronting, they're renting cars, they're renting Airbnbs.
Well, if you're calling that kind of success, yeah.
But they're selling mentorship.
Okay.
And so for the person listening to this right now, learning about what you're describing, I met the people who you're describing through the same methods that Dad or you would have met them during your time, in so much that I wasn't finding people on the internet and mentoring with them.
Right.
I was meeting people who I was impressed by and asking them to mentor me or paying them to mentor me.
But how did you get to the people? How'd you get to the place where you could meet those people?
Well, Dirk was a member of the gym.
Okay.
So Dirk was a member of the gym. He was the first formative mentor. And then I had the guys over at Brute who were experiencing success that I hadn't experienced. Adi, who was experiencing success over at Working Against Gravity. And these became my friends.
Right.
They weren't formal mentors. They were my friends.
Right, I know.
And they were well connected. And they introduced me to their friends.
You know, I think the difference was for your father's field, he was always the height of the people who came into him. It was rare that he had a patient who had achieved great success.
Or that he knew had.
I mean, he purposely chose a blue collar neighborhood to open his practice in, and his patients looked at him as that person.
I also think there's a level. I understand. I think I understand Dad really well because I can almost feel when I'm being Dad and when I'm being you, and
I can see it.
I believe it. There have been people in Dad's practice who he chose not to lean on because he was already successful and he didn't want for more for himself. He wasn't looking for bigger risk.
Right.
Who, because of my ambition, which, by the way, for people listening, there's an element to, I have the luxury of ambition because I grew up in a family that never made me feel insecure. Right? So about money, about myself, Mark Bell has a great quote. I grew up with the performance-enhancing drug that was Parents Who Love Me Unconditionally. I got the same thing. And so there's no judgment if your ambition is less or even more than mine. But Dad didn't have the same ambition that I have. And so there were patients in his clinic, to push back on you a little bit, who were mega successful. Mega. You know at least one of them because you hired his daughter to work in your business, the day camp. And these are people who, in hindsight, I wish I had spent more time with. One of the mistakes I made in my entrepreneurial journey that's coming to, it keeps hitting me like a ton of bricks, and I'm like, damn. Okay, get over it. Now you are where you are. Is I never sought out a job working for a person I really admired who wasn't Dad. And so I never got to be influenced
by someone else
for a long time. The closest I came to that was Joshua Harrison was my mentor at Equinox when I first started, was very impressionable. After that, it was like, Dad, and then I'm doing this by myself.
Right, okay.
Now I'm surrounded by these friends who are like, have success that I plan to have, but haven't achieved.
Right.
And
you're a late bloomer.
I'm a late bloomer, and yes. And so that's a message to all the people. Like, the number one reason why you should buy mentorship is because it's harder to get in the room with the person who you want to influence you unless you pay for it.
Well, you know, that's fair because they have something valuable to share with you.
100%.
And it takes time. And you know, you learn anybody who gives you something for nothing is a really hard person to ask for more.
It is. People ask me all the time when I have conversations with people on my Instagram. And if I don't think I can help them through the DM, I'll say, why don't we schedule a call?
Right.
And they're always like, what do you charge for a call? They often ask. I'm like, I'm getting on a phone with you right now. I don't have a rate for a one-off call. It's not in my business model. So we get on the phone or on a Zoom. They often can't believe I just did it. And they're like, so what's the catch? I'm like, nothing. I would have dealt with the stress of you suffering if I didn't get on this freaking call with you.
Yeah.
So, and they very rarely come back for the more that I would frankly want them to, without charging them. And the question comes up of, how do I pay for something that I can't afford? you can't afford not to.
Oh, that's the old thing. You know, it's the whole thing. How will I get where I want to be if I don't have the information that I need? But I don't have the money to pay for the information. So you just either dig deeper down, or you climb up. It's one way or the other.
Well, so what was it like for you guys? Because I remember I had tried 2 or 3 mentors before Dirk, and it never aligned. Then I hired Dirk with money I didn't have. And I started making these changes.
But you found the money.
I created it.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah, like I cut some things that I was paying for.
Right. You prioritized.
That's it. Went into a little bit of debt, and it was what it was. But what was it like for parents to hear your son has hired a mentor and they pay them when you're sitting there like, I want to mentor you?
That would be a question for Dad, because for me, well, and we've had the conversation, and I said, you have to go outside before you come back home. And that's always the way it is, because Dad has a lot of knowledge about business, and he had a lot of good ideas and good thoughts for you. He recognizes now, and he says it's okay. He needed to hear from somebody else also before I knew what I was talking about. And he's gotten to that place. It always surprises me how malleable he is. And because
he's malleable like steel.
With a lot of fire, maybe.
You need a little heat.
Yeah. That's possible too. He has to want to be, but I think when it comes to ultimately his family, that's where I can get him to bend a little bit. But fire doesn't work with him. I have to do it differently.
Well, it's not actual fire.
I know, but even so, it's not. It's not strength. You got to lead
when you
gently.
push his back against the wall, he's not saying, "Okay, you have me."
Exactly.
He's coming out punching.
No, that's for sure. Right. So you have to,
I get that from him.
Yeah. So but it's ultimately you always come back to the same thing. You want your kids to do well, and if that means they hire somebody from the outside to tell them what you've been telling them for 5 years, and now they believe it, okay, it gives you a little more credibility with them too. Now they say, oh, you know what? I paid this guy a lot of money. Tell me what my father was telling me. Of course, you're getting more from a mentor. There are other places, and especially when it comes to, Dad had a great business and created a great life for all of us. His business was limited. It was brick and mortar, and it was, the beauty of it was we could go on vacation and there was nothing he could do. He didn't get phone calls because he can't adjust somebody from, another place. So that part was really good. And he had a partner who he was comfortable with his whole life. Meet his original partner and then his brother, and but there was people he trusted to take care of the patients well. Let's put it that way. So, that was an easier life in the sense that he says he aimed too low, but I think at the time it was way higher than
he'd ever experienced,
where he had come from. So and it was good enough. I tell him that all the time. I said I have no regrets. We've had a great life. We got a lot more to go, and we're not done. And when I told him we needed more on something, he did something to get more. So, it's ultimately, he always comes back to that. I should have aimed higher. I should have, I got what I wanted. Imagine had I aimed higher. Okay.
I don't know that he should have. And I haven't had this conversation with him before, but his tolerance for risk, he has enough to bet on himself.
Right.
And all of the bets he ever made were on him. And for him to go bigger, he'd have to start placing bets on other people.
Right.
And the only way to place bets on other people and be confident for a guy like Dad is to have all of those people come from within his sphere of influence.
Well, the one person he bet on multiple times.
Who?
You.
Right.
Right.
No, I know. Right.
That's it.
Yes.
He's waiting for the big hit.
Yeah. He keeps asking me for the Bentley. Well, look, that was, I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but one of the hardest decisions for me was to leave clinic because I took money from friends and family to open
the gym.
And I didn't pay him back. And that was really hard because I tried for a really long time to figure out how I was going to be able to make enough money to pay back on the valuation that we placed at the gym. And the reality was I was just a really immature business person who created a business plan that didn't align with reality. And all of those people who invested in me
believed in you, believed what you told them.
Yeah. And hindsight being 2020, I would have done it differently. I would have ended up leaving the Small Business Association with a bag of unpaid cash. But I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
And the way I've been able to rationalize it with myself is they also had a responsibility. And to look at me and to say, is this an investable person? And is that an investable plan? And to ask, everything in here has things going well. What happens if these things happen? How often do we get reports on the financials? Like nobody ever asks any of that stuff. If they did, it would have forced me to think about business differently. But to get back to
that's what happens when you you have friends and family invest in you.
Yeah. And the reality is I would say to people now, I still recommend going to friends and family for investment.
But treat it like a business.
I always thought I was treating it like a business. Always go to friends and I would still recommend go to family and friends for investment. But, and it's a but, qualify with them first that they can absolutely afford to lose it.
Right.
Make sure that you are clear. It is more likely this fails than succeeds. And I need to know that if I sense I'm failing at this, I still have your relationships should I not be able to repay this.
Right.
That's my recommendation.
I think that's a really sound one.
And what's funny about funny, the way it ended when I had to decided to get out of that business without being able to pay anybody back was the people who were actually the most savvy investors. Uncle Steve, who ran a hedge fund or runs a hedge, I don't know what the hell he does anymore. Mike, whose last name I'll leave out. Right. They were both like, that's totally fine. I appreciate you giving me, you didn't even have to give me a call.
I think they both respected you manning up and giving them the call.
They said, you didn't even have to call me, but I appreciate it. But Uncle Steve was like, how much did I invest in that?
Yeah, right.
That's a life I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
Now, other people who were not as financially successful before they started were like, well, do you think you'll be able to pay it back? When do you think that'll happen? And then that came down on Dad. And it was like, so
a few times in multiple businesses
with
those
me?
people. No.
Right. With me only once.
Right.
But so just let people know that you're probably going to fail. And if you succeed, it'll be great. Let them ask you all the questions that you're not thinking about so that you can be more likely to succeed.
Right.
But what we were talking about there was Dad being more ambitious. And the key to being more ambitious is putting more trust in other people to have their own vision that amplifies your own. Okay. And that's something that I think to get into the head of Dad, which is hard to do on your own when he's not here, because of where he came from, it's very difficult to release control. And I think he would have struggled to try and build something big because he was used to people not being able to do things better than he could.
Right. Right. Because he's smart enough. He's very savvy, very strategic. I mean, I would never bet against him. And yes, he feels that he's the best to do it because that's who he's been around. You've always said, you should be friends with people who are better than you, not better than you, but, have certain assets that you may not have. And we would need to widen our circle.
Right. And he's
as much as any friends listening know that we love you and you're great people. But
we're talking. Listen to this.
Yeah.
What's funny is he had that formative experience with that mentor when he was working with Larry Markson from Markson Practice Management. And we went and looked at houses in Florida because he was going to move down there.
Absolutely, that's right.
I remember we could put a horse stable back here. Those are big houses.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about how much less expensive it was to live in Florida, but
it was still, well, it was, yeah.
It was still good.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But it was always curious to me that he never sought out more after that one. I think part of it was he saw the inner workings of how that guy was making his living, felt like there was...
I think it was more that he was never going to be in charge.
No, I mean that he never went after another mentor like that again. Oh. I think he saw that guy was doing some things that didn't align from a morality perspective for how Dad would do it.
You know, I think I think he always refers back to how Whitehall taught him this and this one taught him that, because he brought in great speakers and things like that. Maybe he thought he had learned it all. I don't know.
I don't think he's that. I think he's smarter than that.
Yeah. I mean, I think his time was something that he really appreciated having. Whenever he wasn't in the office, he was home with his family, coaching Little League, basketball, whatever it was for both of you. And I think that was his priority. Mm-hmm. And I say to him all the time, yes, could you have made 10 times the money that you made? Yes. What would the sacrifice have looked like? And it wasn't a sacrifice he was willing to make.
Right. I think the key is doing it without the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Freedom without compromise, if you will.
100%. Yeah. But that, I guess, depends on what you're doing. And, I will always say times were different, and they were. And we weren't perhaps as forward-looking as some other people were. Mm-hmm. But,
You did pretty good.
I have no complaints.
You had one great kid.
Yeah, well, she's not here right now, though. But,
that's good.
Imagine if you all got to meet her.
She did get the full scholarship. I just got everything else. All right.
I have friends who say you got the best of me and the best of Dad.
I did.
I believe that's true.
I did. I think, and this is not I'm just messing around with my sister. I love my sister. She's great.
She is.
I do think I got the best of both of you, and I think that what's interesting is growing up. I was a boy, now I'm a man, and Dad was a successful man that other men looked up to in our town. And I was proud to be Dad's son.
Right.
I took for granted a lot of what you had to offer because you were always there. Mm-hmm. You were home. You were tender, and I knew that you cared, and I knew that you were intelligent. But it was Dad's the business guy. Mm-hmm. Dad's the successful one. I want to go out and learn from Dad. And I didn't understand the reason, in part, that Dad's able to go and do that is he doesn't have to worry about the house. Mm-hmm. Right. He doesn't have to worry about his kids, about any of the stuff at home, because you're taking care of that. And so I took that for granted for probably 39 years. Mm-hmm. No, I'm just kidding. 35.
Yeah.
And that, when I stopped taking that for granted, I think I started to be able to lean into more of you. Mm-hmm. And that allowed for me to take big leaps. So I appreciate that.
You're making me cry now.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I will just say that as far as being your parent, I am immensely proud of you.
Thanks.
I really am. And I appreciate, my favorite days are the days I get to spend with. I love my family, I love my grandbabies, and I love everything. And I love when I can have a day with you alone, because that's time we don't get a lot of. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate your wanting to speak with me today. And, I love you, and I hope that the people listening know the same kind of love, and that no matter what, we love you with all your scrapes and other things, because we see the real you. We know the real you, your vulnerabilities and your strengths. And we're proud to call you. I'm proud to call you my son. I'm very proud of you.
Thanks.
So, love you.
I'm proud of my parents too.
Thank you.
Turn pro. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.